All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you. Final program of the year. That is today's Friday free for all. I've got a little burr in my hair. I did laundry, and I guess there must have been a little piece of tissue in the washing machine, and it disintegrated. And I can't stand when that happens. I've been picking this little pieces of Kleenex or toilet paper off of my shirt, and it's really irritating me, and I just saw that little bit in my hair too. So there you go. All right, little bit of humor, very little, to start off your Friday free-for-all. Hope you'll join me, because you won't get a chance, and I know you're all chomping at the bit to talk to me in this year, 2023. This is your last chance. Well, you can call me on obviously, if you have my home number, or if you email me, I'll call you anyway. But if you want to talk to me on a Halitics live stream, this is your chance. 240-242-5646. I promoted this stream as a free-for-all, but also one where I'm going to focus on this report, bombshell report. And I use the word bombshell literally and figuratively by the New York Times, talking about just how evil Israel's actions are in Gaza over the past 2 months. And then we're going to segue into a little conversation about AOC and why I believe she is responsible, in part, not obviously the most responsible person, but certainly is complicit in the genocide against Gaza, notwithstanding the crocodile tears she shed on MSNBC. And I do want to end, in terms of my prepared topics, with a conversation about Brianna Joy Gray, who, as I have said, was one of my favorite live streamers. And still, in some ways, I have a lot of, I guess, interest in what she has to say and take her very seriously. But she's double and triple down on her absurd take with respect to Harvard President Claudine Gay and the credible, in fact, I would say at this point, confirmed allegations of plagiarism against her. So we'll finish with that conversation if we have the time. Anyway, if you want to join me, though, 240-242-5646. And I heard a little chime, but I don't think that was anyone calling in. So let's get right to the slides that I've got here. And yeah, it's a bit of a, let's see, because weird stuff with my computer. I went to a slightly different system, which I actually prefer, cheaper. I don't have to pay for your calls now, but it did cause me to have to change a little bit the way I present, and that I'm still, I guess the best way to put it is I'm still kind of learning that. It's not so much it's a problem for me. I'm just learning exactly how to do this right. There's a 5+ minute long video by the New York Times, which I recorded, and I was planning to play some or all of it for you. It tracks this story in today's paper, and I say today's paper guardedly because I know we're using virtual media these days. Obviously, everything that I read pretty much is from a screen. It is not from the hard copy of the newspaper. The reason I say obviously is because I'm able to present the relevant portions to you very easily simply by doing screen captures and downloading the entire copy and then selecting, cutting and pasting what I think is most important, most relevant. This is the headline. A Times investigation tracked Israel's use of one of its most destructive bombs in South Gaza. And there's so much wrong. These are so clearly criminal actions by the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli government. This is the language again. You know, people said French. I think they were the French philosophers in the wake of the Holocaust and in the wake of the evil that Nazi Germany perpetrated in Europe. Many of the French philosophers really lamented the inability of language to communicate just how evil the Nazis were. In fact, we saw that before the Holocaust. Some of the post-World War I novelists also really lamented the failure of the European languages, whether German, English, French, to fully communicate the horrors of global warfare as it was practiced in the early 20th century during what was then called the Great War, became known today as World War I. So words only can take us so far. Even visuals can only take us so far. I mentioned that I had recorded that video, so I am actually going to try to get it up for you because I think it's instructive. I think it tells us a little more than just the words do. If I can get this to you, I will. It may take a moment. I don't think it will be that challenging for me to do, although sometimes, I can go through some little bit of headaches, and I don't even see it here, so I'm a little, what the heck happened to my videos? Where are my videos? Where are my Halitics videos? Let's see. Here we go. Here's Halitics. Oh, you don't see this, but I see it. Yeah. So I'm going to have to open, and then we'll get to the video. Yeah, it looks like it's here. By the way, I'm sure you love my little narrative. Should have had this done all in advance, but I was, honestly, folks, I was so focused on getting everything prepared for you that I didn't prepare for you as well as I should have. I think we got it. Here we go. Israel, this is going to be... And the New York Times really lets you know. And I have to say, one reason also, folks, I just want to tell you, I went with the New York Times. There's lots of other media that are covering this. Channel 24, France 24, I think does a real nice job. I often cite to the Al Jazeera coverage. But, many of my viewers, and when I say many, I mean as a percentage, not as an absolute number, because there aren't that many of you, although I wish there were more, and I'm hoping you'll get there. Maybe next year is the year we blow up and we get past the 1,000 subscribers mark. Help me out. Click subscribe, click like. I use the New York Times here. I use the New York Times video because I know a lot of folks instinctively trust the New York Times. You instinctively believe if it's in the New York Times, it's true. And if it's not in the New York Times, maybe you don't think it really happened at all. And that's something I fight against quite a bit on my live stream, to point examples out to you where the New York Times isn't giving you the full story, where the New York Times is in fact simply telling you what elites want you to hear, not what is indeed what I would say is the news that's most crucial, most critical, most important. So now let's get to this video here, and I may or may not play all of it. It's about 5 minutes, but I don't want to jump around too much. So let's see if we can glean more about the tragedy, but really the great crime that is being committed in Gaza right now, the moral crisis of our time.
This is an area in Gaza where for weeks civilians fled to find safety. These are 2,000-pound bombs, one of the most destructive munitions in Western military arsenals. When a 2,000-pound bomb detonates, it unleashes a blast wave and metal fragments thousands of feet in every direction. Sometimes, 2,000-pound bombs leave giant craters in the earth, like this strike in South Gaza in November.
All right, so I'm going to just stop it there for a second. I think it's really important for people who are inclined not to believe the reports out of Gaza, whether it's the total number of casualties, the count of the dead, the targeting of hospitals. I think it's really important for those of you who are skeptical, and I've interviewed some of you. This is from the New York Times. This is the most, quote, credible news source there is, and it's one that I don't think anyone would accuse of being pro-Palestine. At least no one could fairly or legitimately accuse it of being pro-Palestine. You're seeing live footage of people scouring through rubble for their family members, for their friends, for their neighbors. in the wake of these enormous bombs, far more deadly than the bombs that the Nazis, for example, dropped during the Battle of Britain on London. Far bigger, far more powerful. That is what Israel is doing right now during the holiday season, even in Gaza. 20,000 now credibly claimed to be killed, murdered by Israel. And if you want to say, well, they're not all murdered because some of them are Hamas fighters, fine. Okay, it's 19,000. Does that make you feel better? Does that make you think it's okay? Is that okay if it's only 19,000 instead of 20? That's what's happening. And this is what we are supporting, our government. I get so angry at people like AOC, and I am so harshly censorious, if that's the right word, maybe it isn't, of the so-called progressive left, because they have failed. They have failed most miserably to fight for these victims. And I don't care whether they go on, MSNBC and wring their hands. Actions, deeds speak so much louder than words. And the deeds that the progressives have committed to support this are voting for an AIPAC Congress member who always shepherds through legislation that Israel wants. It's failing to stop the work of the House whenever possible, and government whenever, to throw every bit of sand you can in the gears to force the government to respond to poor, struggling, and working people who are against this killing, this senseless killing. They lament the worst excesses of the corporatist, neoliberal, neocon state. But when it comes to actually challenging it, taking it on, they don't. And that makes them just as guilty, just as complicit as the worst right-wing extremist Republican. Maybe in some ways worse, because Marjorie Taylor Greene at least has voted against any kind of funding for Israel and for Ukraine, where we also would be seeing scenes of incredible devastation and destruction if it weren't for Israel supplanting it, Israel's genocidal rampage supplanting it in the media. All right, let's see if we can get back to the video here. And again, I give the New York Times all the credit in the world for doing this. You know, they really bring it home what our support for Israel is doing.
Munitions experts say 2,000-pound bombs are almost never used by the U.S. military anymore in densely populated areas. Israel says it must destroy Hamas above and below ground to prevent terrorist attacks like October 7th.
So, again, I want to interrupt it because that's Israel's claim, right? Is, well, we have to do this. We're sorry for all the collateral damage. But what are you going to do? I mean, we got to protect ourselves. And plus there are human shields. These are human shields. And it's Hamas's fault for using them as human shields. That's Israel's defense. It completely fails under the weakest scrutiny. Without my glasses, could see through how fake that argument is. And one way that you can know it's BS is because if Israel really were concerned about its civilians' safety, it wouldn't be out there murdering Gazans and creating whole new generations of terrorists who are now, without question, going to be sworn to kill as many Israelis as they possibly can, and maybe Jews as well. Maybe Jews as well. It reminds me of the scene at the beginning of The Godfather 2, where, or it's early on in that movie, and the mafioso Don Vito Corleone sees his father taken away by the Sicilian thugs hired by the local kingpin. And they are then going to kill the son, right? Their goal is to kill everyone in that family, in Vito Andolini's family. But he gets away, and of course, he returns to Sicily to kill his father's killer. So who is going to think that those Gazans, especially the children, the boys and young men who are subjected to this, who see their mothers killed, their fathers killed, their siblings murdered, who is going to think they're not going to say as soon as they possibly can, they're going to take up arms to kill their victimizers? Of course they will. Israel couldn't give a rat's fat. They want endless war. If Israel cared about reducing their own civilian death rate, which is a tiny fraction of the number of Gazans they've killed. But if they really, really cared about that, they would, of course, sue for peace. They would, of course, take their foot off the throat of the Palestinian people, and they would work for a true one-state solution where everyone from the river to the sea is a free and equal citizen. Israel doesn't care about that. They care about power. They care about land control, complete control in the region. And that's why they're killing all these Gazans.
And claims it's taking extraordinary measures to protect civilians. But a Times investigation using aerial imagery and artificial intelligence found visual evidence suggesting Israel used these munitions in the area it designated safe for civilians at least 200 times. Our analysis indicates 2,000-pound bombs were dropped on a routine basis in South Gaza during the first 6 weeks of the war. And it suggests that even for those who followed every Israeli evacuation order and advisory, there was still no safety to be found in a war zone that's more dangerous for civilians than any in recent history. Amplifying the danger are many factors. Hamas intentionally uses dense civilian areas to position military personnel and weapons.
All right, so that's kind of part of Israel's defense, right? We can't help it. It's Hamas's fault. They're using human shields. So my response is, they're using human shields, so therefore don't bomb. That's all. It's really simple. You know that because of what Hamas does, there will be, in part because of what Hamas does, that if you drop those bombs, that there will be very high rates of civilian casualties. So there's a real easy solution to that problem, Israel. Don't drop the bombs. That's all. Just don't. Come up with another way to prevent future attacks like that of October 7th, which, by the way, would be a much better strategy than bombing and rooting out Hamas in any event. But, like I said, they don't give a crap about how many thousands, tens of thousands of lives they take. They don't care. They clearly don't care. They said go south, and then they bombed the south.
Buried underground are vast tunnel networks used by Hamas fighters, but no bomb shelters for civilians. When the war started, Israel completely sealed off Gaza's borders and claimed it was going to keep civilians out of the crossfire by establishing a safe zone and issuing evacuation orders. By air, phone, and social media, over 1 million people living in northern Gaza were told they must move to the south to be safe.
The IDF is calling for the people of Gaza to evacuate to southern Gaza,
to go south of this river.
Move south. For your own safety, move south.
But the evacuation routes and the safe zone were anything but safe.
I mean, look at the damage. It's extraordinary. It's cataclysmic. It's catastrophic. And I think it's important that people realize that, again, this, and I want to reiterate it because it's so important. This comes from the New York Times. This is not from Al Jazeera. I'm just going to turn the volume down so you play a little bit more. You can see a lot of the subtitles, but I want to move through this because we only have, a short period of time. And frankly, I do want to hear from you. I want to get to some other topics. I'm sorry, I'm sorry to have to discuss this on the last program of the year, but this is the moral crisis of our time, and we absolutely have no choice but to reckon with it and do what we can, do whatever we can to try to prevent more killing. Our government is not. We are not doing what we can to prevent more killing. We are enabling the killers, the murderers. So if you want to know why I'm so angry at the progressives, especially because they're the ones who claim to care about poor, struggling, and working people. And make no mistake, this is a class conflict, just like what we have in the United States. The Gazans are poor. The Gazans are powerless. The Gazans are occupying territory, land that Israel wants. This is, as much as it is anything else, it is a class war between rich and powerful people against poor and helpless people. The progressives, the Jamal Bowmans, the AOCs, the Cori Bushes, they all say, oh, we're on the side of the poor, we're on the side of the Palestinians, we're on the side of the people of color, although the color of the skin of the people on both sides is pretty much the same. That's what they say. And they give some nice little speeches about it now and again. But when it comes time to speaking truth to the real power and using what power they have, they're completely, invisible. All right, let me see if I can get you that volume back.
Israel was dropping 2,000-pound bombs in the area it was ordering civilians to go.
2,000-pound bombs.
The Times programmed an artificial intelligence tool to analyze satellite imagery of South Gaza to search for bomb craters. The AI tool detected over 1,600 possible craters. We manually reviewed each one to weed out the false positives, like shadows, water towers, or bomb craters from a previous conflict. We measured the remaining craters to find ones that spanned roughly 40 feet across or more, which experts say are typically formed only by 2,000-pound bombs. Ultimately, we identified 208 of these craters in satellite imagery and drone footage, indicating 2,000-pound bombs posed a pervasive threat to civilians seeking safety across South Gaza. It's likely that more of these bombs were used than what was captured in our reporting. Because of limited satellite imagery, our analysis omits parts of South Gaza, and military experts say that often, depending on the target, fuse, and type of soil, a 2,000-pound bomb may not leave a crater at all. Even bomb craters that are visible from the sky do not convey the destruction unleashed on the ground. This crater in central Khan Yunis was from an airstrike in October.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. We do have John on the line. So let's get to you, John. Thanks for calling. What's going on, man?
Hey, I called in for the free-for-all. I was going to comment real quick on the conflict in Israel/Palestine. And I think it can be summed up to say that that conflict cannot be stopped from within. I think outside forces have to apply pressure, and that means us. That means we have to stop vetoing resolutions that would compel Israel to stop being aggressive, both, not just in warfare, but with their land grabbing. And I don't think that those two sides are going to be able to, I think they both need to be forced to get along, basically.
Well, here's the thing, John. Of course, I agree with you, but we're not doing that. The United States, which is clearly the one true power that could make a difference here, is simply not doing that. In fact, and I'm not going to play the rest of that video, but it goes on for a few more minutes, but I'm going to just put on the screen here this slide, which comes from that same article. Since October, the United States has sent 5,000 plus 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. We've also, and one of the defenses, I guess I don't know, one of the actions that the U.S. military says Israel should take is to drop less powerful bombs that are more, I guess, pinpointable, right? Those smart bomb type things that go into tunnels. And we've sent them plenty of the littler bombs. I guess they kill fewer people, but so I don't know that they should get credit for shipping small bombs. But they also, our government is also selling to Israel these enormous weapons of mass destruction. I don't know whether it's directly at the behest of the weapons manufacturers. My guess is they're very pleased with that decision, and they're also showing their pleasure with large donations to the Biden campaign and to leaders in Congress.
This reminds me of I'm pretty sure it was a CNN interview with Susan Rice. She was our UN ambassador like about 10 years ago. And there was a resolution that the UN voted on, and it was to get Israel to stop developing in the West Bank. And the United States was the only permanent member of the Security Council to veto it. There were also 10 temporary members. That basically 14 members of the Security Council voted to uphold the resolution. The United States vetoed it. When they got Susan Rice on CNN to ask her why, she basically said, well, the reason is that we were afraid that if we went ahead with this, if we voted for the resolution, it would have effectively created even more development in the West Bank. And so at that point, I mean, that was like a facepalm moment where you just know that they're full of crap. And I don't know, I think you and I had this discussion before where these politicians here are afraid of losing their seat to, you call it APAC, I call it AIPAC, or not to that entity, but having that entity, fund their opposition, their challenger. And I don't know. And now you're saying that almost every member of the squad is afraid to go against them, except for Rashida Tlaib.
I didn't say that. I know AOC gave like a supposedly excoriated the U.S. government for failing to, or the Congress for failing to vote for a ceasefire. But I find her claims, I find her complicit. And that's why I put on the screen this picture. Hakeem Jeffries, this is from The Forward, so a Jewish publication. Hakeem Jeffries, a staunchly pro-Israel Democrat, will lead his party in the U.S. House. Jeffries visited Israel 5 times in the past decade. This is from earlier this fall, or in the fall, and calls Jerusalem New York City's 6th borough. So they couldn't have found anybody, the Democrats, the House Democrats couldn't have found anybody who was more closely tied to Israel than the man they voted for by consensus, by acclamation, to lead them in Congress, their House Minority Leader. Now, my question, John, you and I have disagreed. I've been much more. I am much more willing to blame. I blame the Democrats for much. Do you feel it's fair for me to point them out, to hold them responsible for this vote and say this matters more, And I want to hear your answer, but then I'm going to debate with you if you say that, well, it's a political decision. But what do you think? Is this okay that every single Democrat voted for Hakeem Jeffries to lead the caucus in the House?
But if I understand correctly, you're saying that AOC did indeed speak out against sending bombs to Israel, and did she vote against it? I want to establish.
I don't know how she voted. I don't know if there was even a vote. She voted for a ceasefire, or she called for a ceasefire. I'm saying what really matters is her vote and the votes of the squad in support of Hakeem Jeffries to lead the caucus.
Well,
and this was on October 20th. Let me just be real clear. This was on October 20th, after Israel had started its murderous reprisal against Gaza. It's not like this was all what we did. No, maybe we voted for Jeffries because we wanted to show unity. It was important for Democrats to stand together. But we didn't, there wasn't a moral crisis. There wasn't a humanitarian crisis unfolding. There wasn't genocide unfolding in Gaza when we voted for Jeffries. If we had known, maybe we wouldn't have supported him. But despite the fact that this was the most important issue of the time in that moment, they still all rallied behind the Congress member from AIPAC, the Congress member from the defense industry, from Wall Street, the Congress member who supported efforts to keep more progressive Democrats from getting elected because AIPAC was targeting them.
Okay, Hal, I'm going to be honest with you. I think you are being a petty political purist right now. There are just too many moving parts in this situation that we're in, which is very precarious. And so I think they felt that it was strategically the right thing to do to show solidarity like that, even though it probably left a bad taste in quite a few people's mouths to vote for him. I just maybe felt that they felt that it was more important to try to bring the factions of the left together, because we are a hard group of people to herd. Herding progressives is like herding cats, right?
But we put in charge of the herding the guy who supports the most evil action on the planet right now.
Right, and I am opposed to that, and I'm sure there are many progressives who are opposed to that. But we have to become the majority, and we have to identify these people like Hakeem Jeffries and get them primaried out. I mean, that's
well, then
the
why, if that's the ultimate goal, why would you ever vote for him to be the leader of the entire Democratic caucus in the House? If you really believe, and of course I agree, he shouldn't be elected dog catcher. If that's what AOC and all of them believe, why didn't they vote against him?
Well, I just got done telling you.
I don't understand. You're saying on the one hand, we have to support him, and on the other hand, we have to vote him out. To me, I don't see, that seems to me those are two mutually irreconcilable statements.
No, the time to vote him out is in a primary. You get rid of him in a primary. Once he's in, then the calculation is who's got the best chance of winning this. I mean, weren't they kind of angling, and I think they should have known that this wasn't going to happen, but weren't they angling for a couple Republicans to get frustrated and to jump the fence and vote for Hakeem Jeffries, and then somehow we could have ended up with a power sharing situation. I mean, it was wishful thinking, but it was a 0% chance of that happening if some people broke rank and went and.
Well, I guess we'll just have to reach the conclusion, John, based on what you're saying, that on this issue, there's no meeting of the minds, and perhaps none possible. Because to me, voting for a Hakeem Jeffries is akin to voting for anybody who's as evil as they come. He's supporting the most evil thing going on the planet right now. He's backing it. What's the point of having power if you're going to use what power you do have to enable a genocide?
These things, these movements take time. I think eventually our representatives will get the picture. They will get the point that, this is not okay. When their constituents, when they start feeling the heat from their constituents, it just happens so slowly. It really does. And especially with all the resistance that we get from the establishment, I remember when AOC first got in, all the headbutting between her and Nancy Pelosi, and now they're at relative peace with each other. Nancy Pelosi has accepted that she can't get rid of AOC. And
AOC has given in to Nancy Pelosi. AOC has enabled Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi won. It's not a question of they came to some sort of a compromise or, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do that.
They did.
Basically, Nancy Pelosi got everything she wanted. She and her husband continue to buy and sell stocks based on insider information. Nobody stopped them from doing that. There was no vote on Medicare for all. There's been no vote on the Pentagon budget. There was, and in fact, Nancy Pelosi's replacement, John, is even worse than she was. So it's not a question of, there was the Democratic Party kind of had a come to Jesus moment and they decided, we got to be a little nicer to poor, struggling, and working people because of AOC. Instead, AOC said, hey, you know what? I'm good. We're all good here. We're all having a good time in the White House, in the Capitol, and who cares if what happens to everybody else?
AOC got on some very prominent committees, and her voice is heard by the entire country. I almost feel like it's the one reason why the media now promotes Marjorie Taylor Greene as some sort of counterbalance against, the true populist voice that AOC brought into the media. I mean, they can't ignore her, when they have to post clips of her grilling CEOs in committee. They want a voice from the other side. I have a feeling that is why the media promotes Marjorie Taylor Greene so much. However, that is what AOC got from Nancy Pelosi. That you say she got nothing, she just caved in. She got some very prominent positions. She got into a position where her voice is heard, and she can now influence people, and that was a pretty valuable. That was the best
how is that voice being heard translated into any tangible gains for poor, struggling, and working class Americans? The PRO Act wasn't passed. The $15 minimum wage wasn't passed. There's no Medicare for all, even a vote on it. So I understand she supports tax the rich. There she is in her resplendent $10,000 dress. Her handmaiden is not in this particular picture. I'm just trying to understand what have the American people or her constituents even gained from her getting on these committees.
They are now getting access to that point of view in the mainstream media, and that didn't used to be the case. That you didn't have people hearing voices like hers, and so that and their response to it, like I said, was to put a few extremists to give them a megaphone. But
I guess we'll just we're not going to come. We're not. This is one area, John. A lot of issues we see very closely together. This we do not. Let's move on real quick. Did you have something else you wanted to bring up? Because it's the free for all. So yes, anything you want to bring up?
Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about El Salvador and their crackdown on gangs, and I believe what they had to do was they had to curtail some civil rights to do it. They had to lengthen the amount of time they could detain people without a trial. And I forget what else they did. Basically, they declared a state of emergency and started rounding up suspected gang members and throwing them in prison. and it seems to be working. And the El Salvadorian people overall are in favor of this. But they're getting pressure from the outside, a bunch of South American and Central American countries, from civil rights groups, to stop doing what they're doing. But the El Salvadorian people seem to want it at this point. They're really, when crime, they said there 10 years ago, you could not tell the difference between El Salvador and an active war zone when you looked at the number of people being killed and raped and injured. It was indiscernible. So you would think, looking at their statistics, that there was an active war going on, but there really wasn't. It was just people who refused to pay gangs their
extortion,
their protection money.
They wouldn't pay extortion.
Yeah, their extortion. They were getting killed, and in very brutal ways too.
So let me just real quick, because so my take on that is people want peace. People want security, and they will give up freedom when life is too dangerous. When life is too cheap, people will give up freedom. And I don't blame them for it. I understand it. You know, we're innately driven to survive. So of course, if it's a choice between freedom or getting shot in the head, we're going to choose to give up the freedom. But I mean, where do we go with this? What's your kind of takeaway beyond that?
My takeaway is, I'm sure conservatives are salivating over the opportunity to do this in American cities if they take power, that they go into Chicago and start rounding people up and jailing them. And yes, they'll lower the crime rate. That Chicagoans Chicago is the reason that state is blue. Illinois might start turning red, and places in California where crime is. Although we don't have crime issues like Chicago has, I think maybe a couple of our smaller cities out here.
I mean, San Francisco's definitely been struggling. I know there are a lot of reports. I don't know if the numbers are as dire as the breathless reporting by media. Probably it's not as serious. I think crime rates in general have actually been dropping since the pandemic started to wind down. So there's that. But I agree with you. Sure, extremists on the right always want an opportunity to crack down on people's civil rights. And I think that's why it's so important for people like AOC and progressives in Congress to fight for a fair, just society where crime rates will drop, because people feel like they're getting a fair deal. They don't, and also because you don't need. Now, some people are going to commit crimes no matter what, but there's a cost benefit analysis like in everything else. And if you're doing okay, then you don't need the money necessarily. And if you're not going to get that much from stealing anyway, you probably won't do it. So this is why it's very important that we promote, much more equitable distribution of wealth and income. But again, I would say that our progressive leadership has failed us in that endeavor. I know you would say, well, it's the Republicans who've stymied it. It's a bit of both. I'll give you that. It's a bit of both.
Yeah, and I think what's going to get in the way is people's desire to have instant gratification, because the progressive way is more proactive and it takes longer to achieve just about anything that we want to achieve, because we want a permanent fix. We want a holistic approach to solving problems. And the right wing seems to like, reactionary, instantaneous solutions that, unfortunately can be and can throw our system out of whack. I just reading about what's going on in Central America just makes me think, right-wing think tanks are studying that situation and seeing how they can implement it here, because the people of El Salvador, like I said, seem to favor it, while everybody else outside of them is looking at it saying, this is dangerous, you're moving down a road but what they had was dangerous. You know,
Of course.
I think
Absolutely.
we're a long shot from being that. Like I said, there are probably certain areas of the country. Well, even out in the country, you know, there's a huge meth problem. There's crime, not necessarily violent crime, but a lot of property crime, and people are getting fed up with that. And
I think there's
I
just so
could
much
see them-
desperation. There's hopelessness in large percentages of the population. I'm going to get to Brianna Joy Gray in a second. I don't have the clip, but she was talking about how, and I wish I did because I'm going to be critical of her, but she made a very, very powerful point, John, about how those who say, like the Paul Krugmans of the world and others who are doing well, who are economically elite, they're saying, "Oh, look at how the employment numbers are good, and you know, we inflation is coming down." And she makes the point that the entire system continues to be stacked against, you know, the bottom 95%, the bottom 99% are all struggling. Maybe the struggle isn't quite as awful as it was a few years ago for many, but it's still not good. It's still not easy. And this is something I think too many on the left refuse to acknowledge.
Yeah, I think the main problem that especially younger generations are having is the prospect of owning your own home is possibly even unreachable at this point. It used to be, we went through this phase where it used to be you had to work 50, 60 hours a week in order to save to buy a home. And that was like pretty much both members of the family of a couple working together to save for a home. I don't even think that, I think this youngest generation is realizing that if you don't inherit a home, you're not going to get one. And so I think that is like shaping who they are. I think that's why they're so different. They're just kind of resigned. They don't know what to do.
I think that's exactly right. I think we've allowed elites to hijack our country, and it's almost all of us, except for those at the very top, are paying a very, very stiff price. And my goal in doing this program is to try to unite us together to find solutions, which I think can only be political in nature. Any kind of revolution would likely lead to things becoming even worse. But I can't blame people who will go into the streets because they're so desperate and so angry. John, final word from you. I do want to get to the end of the program. Okay. It's 12:50 now, but I do wish you a happy New Year coming up. And if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If anyone's offended by my saying Merry Christmas, I'm sorry. I wish I could help, but if you tell me your holiday, I'll wish you a happy holiday, whatever it may be. But John, Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Yeah, happy solstice. That's what we celebrate.
Yes, well, that was yesterday. We've already gone through it, right? Or I guess it's still today. Is today the shortest day of the year? Maybe it's today.
No, yesterday. What's today? The 21st, 22nd?
Today's number 22. Yeah.
22. Yesterday was the shortest day of the year, I think. But yeah, I sleep really well this time of year because of all the darkness. I love it. But yeah, so my final word is try not to be so cynical and just kind of understand that there are things compelling our politicians to do what they do. They're not really completely acting of their own free will. At least I don't think they feel that they are. There is something that's got a grip of, that is tethering them, putting them on a leash, and they're trying to break free. But I think the conversation's oftentimes a little bit more nuanced than you allow it to be, and just try not to be so cynical. Try to throw that in there. Say, are they maybe being compelled? They're worried that they're going to lose their seat, and if they lose their seat, that the dominoes will start falling, and conservatives will get more power and they'll entrench their power. Is that what's going on here? Or, are they really, are they really becoming corrupt? And because I don't think that a lot of those progressives are are becoming corrupt. I think they're just trying to make the best strategic decision they can in very precarious times where one false move could land us without our democracy. One really bad election could put us in a very, very bad situation, and that we can't get out of for I believe 50 years is what Tom Hartman says is how long the average authoritarian regime rules. So,
John, thanks so much. Again, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you. I am honored that you take time out of your schedule to call in, even when we disagree, or especially because we sometimes do disagree. As I said, have a great New Year and Merry Christmas. I'm going to let you go at this point. I want to get to my second topic. Well, it's sort of where they're all connected, the progressives, and where I feel like they've let us down to a significant degree. So another progressive, or someone I've always sort of considered to be a progressive, that would be Briahna Joy Gray. And I think she just really has. I don't usually focus, honestly, folks. I rarely focus on other bloggers or other posters or live streamers. We're all sort of in the same universe. I don't want to be too hard on them, and I certainly, but unless they deserve it, they deserve it. And she's one of my favorites. But because I've enjoyed her work in the past, because I viewed her as an ally in the past, and because I've sort of think she sees through so much of the cant on the left, the BS on the left, it's really disheartening that she. I don't know how to even phrase. Again, words sort of fail me. But here's what, and I think Jeff is talking about Briahna Joy Gray. Maybe he was talking about me, but since he threw in the teenage girl, I think he was mocking her defense. This is from the program I did. No More Joy. Has Bree jumped the shark? And the reason I called it that's gotten a lot of hits, by the way, on live stream. That live stream has done quite well. The reason I called it that is because Briahna Joy Gray's Twitter handle is Bree Joy. So No More Joy, obviously the pun on joy, has Bree jumped the shark. And he describes, Jeff does, watching her live stream or her Hill Rising as watching a teenage girl on TikTok. And some of the streams or the video that I displayed in that particular video cast, I was very, very impressed with, and I was using it to demonstrate how much I enjoyed and appreciated her takes in the past. But recently she's kind of moved in what I believe a very, very disappointing direction, and that is supporting the mayor of Boston's whites only or not white, no whites, right? No whites holiday party. And her, I think what's become almost laughable, her defense of the Harvard president, Claudine Gay, who more reports now have come out of her plagiarizing. I played a clip from a professor from, I believe, the University of Florida, I may be wrong, who was very, very upset about her work being cited without proper attribution and demanding that there be consequences. That's Carol Swain. More is coming out, and Briahna Joy Gray seems, to either think it doesn't matter, or I'm really not even clear what her exact argument is, but I want to play part of this from a more recent Hill Rising, because I'm just disheartened. I want to have allies. I want to have allies in the fight against elitism, in the fight against inequality. And Claudine Gay isn't one of them. And now I have to say neither is Briahna Joy Gray, at least with the way she responds. So let's get this going. Here we go. This is from the Hill Rising, maybe in the past couple of days. I'm not sure exactly when. Here we go.
Embattled Harvard President Claudine Gay will possibly be making a return visit to Capitol Hill amid ongoing allegations of academic malfeasance and plagiarism. The Hill reports that the House Education Committee plans to expand its investigation into Gay to include allegations that she committed plagiarism in academic works. Now, this follows the committee's infamous hearing on campus anti-Semitism featuring Gay and also the leaders of the University of Pennsylvania and MIT. Now,
All right, I'll stop it there for a moment. We'll jump ahead in a moment to the section where Brianna Joy Gray attempts, I suppose, to defend Gay, although she's kind of disingenuous in her description of her position, as I see it. But the main argument seems to be, I guess, from Brianna Joy Gray, is that this is not something that Congress should be investigating. And I guess I get that. On the other hand, why isn't she outraged at the actions taken by this incredibly powerful, influential leader of academia? It seems to me that that's relevant, very, very relevant. Do I think Harvard should be do I think Congress should be spending their time talking about whether Claudine Gay is a plagiarizer? No, it's not that important, but it's important. What's more important is endless war in Gaza, the killing of innocent civilians and the tens of thousands by Israel. That is more important, but this isn't not important. And I don't get her view, so I'm going to play this. Maybe she's saying something that you understand or you agree with. It's very upsetting to me. It's troubling to me.
Should take weeks and months. It happened immediately. It was not done by the actual ethicists of the department under which Gay's work should have fallen, but by Harvard Corporation itself, rubber stamping this. I know you want this to be about the free speech issues and all of that, but none of that gets around the fact that these are actual academic.
So let me stop it. So Robbie Suave is explaining why he believes the initial examination or investigation into Gay by Harvard was not sufficient, that it was done by the corporation, which he believes, I think very rightly so, just wanted to make this go away. It is actually an academic issue. Claudine Gay had submitted material for credit to Harvard. It was how she got her doctorate. She's Dr. Claudine Gay. And the issuing body that gave her that PhD is the one that should be investigating whether maybe, given the allegations of plagiarism, she is not actually entitled to that PhD. This is how institutions react when there are credible claims of plagiarism and they have conferred degrees on people. They might say, well, this degree is not warranted. We thought that the work that Dr. Gay had now Dr. Gay, then now Dr. Gay, then Ms. Gay, now soon maybe no longer Dr. Gay. We thought it was her work. If it's not her work, she doesn't get the doctorate, right? And here's Brianna Joy Gray's completely, I think, nonsensical response.
Violations that should be handled by Harvard.
I think they should absolutely go through every single professor at Harvard University and do.
Which is absurd. Why should they go through every single professor? They're not all those other professors aren't being charged with. No one's raised the question of whether they all have committed plagiarism. Maybe some have been charged with plagiarism. If there wasn't a sufficient investigation, do it. But for her to say, well, we've got to look at everyone. No, you don't look at everyone when only one person has been alleged to have committed a particular offense. You look at the person if it's credible. And clearly it's credible. The Harvard Crimson said it was credible. The professor whose work that was allegedly plagiarized said she plagiarized me. I mean, what more does Brianna Gray want? She wants everyone? I mean, to say everyone's guilty is the same as saying no one's guilty, isn't it?
An investigation. In fact,
we're starting at the top. We're starting with the head honcho.
Well, I don't think you have to start anywhere. I think you do it a wholesome investigation. And I think that you should actually probably.
how many staff? Apparently, Harvard has more employees than it has students by a significant margin. And that is a problem that I'd like them to investigate. Why are they spending their $1 billion, or is it trillion? No, I guess $1 billion in endowment money on just having a bloated staff? That's absurd. Are they all contributing to the academic environment to ensure that the students who matriculate at Harvard get a great education? Or are they coasting on their record and just using the name to feed at the trough? What's going on there? I want to know. That's what we should be investigating, not whether some associate professor who's been there for 2 years, just graduated with a PhD, whether they committed plagiarism. No. If someone says, oh yeah, I just was looking through my professor's work because I was curious about, what he or she had written, what they had written on this topic, and it was vaguely, it rang a bell, and I went back and I found that they copied word for word from this other work, well then yeah, you investigate them. But until then, no. So she's absurd.
Start in sequential order of who actually has been targeted, who's been flagged for these kind of violations. So you can go back again to someone like Alan Dershowitz. Similarly, there was an investigation by then interim president,
Dershowitz is the real plagiarizer here. And I've gone through this. There are major distinctions between the Dershowitz case and the case involving Dr. Gay. Dershowitz was actually investigated. And he was investigated not just by Harvard, but by his publisher, who stood by his work. And Dershowitz, more importantly, did not submit the work that he was allegedly guilty of plagiarizing to Harvard. He didn't get a credit from Harvard for it. He's not a doctor of law, a Juris Doctor, because he submitted a fake dissertation that he had copied from somebody else. I'm not saying that's Dr. Gay's situation, but that's what people are credibly claiming. So it's not the same. They're not the same.
Derek Bach and Charles Ogletree, the details of which were never made public. Let's have a conversation about that. It was also corroborated that he had plagiarized by a number of other esteemed professors from around the country.
I looked into that. She says that. I couldn't find proof of that. I want to find these other allegations. The main allegation of plagiarism of which I'm aware was by Norman Finkelstein, and this was involving work that Dershowitz had done on Israel. And she brought up Derek Bach and Charles Ogletree, so that is consistent with what I understand to have been the situation involving Dershowitz, because Dershowitz's book came out, I think, around 2000, maybe it was a year or two before, after 2000, and then there was the investigation a year or two later. Well, that's exactly when Derek Bach, I think, was still at Harvard, maybe as some sort of emeritus position, and same with Charles Ogletree, who I think was a Harvard law professor at that point. I could be wrong, but this would be perfectly consistent with that timeline. So all the other folderol that Brianna Joy Gray is bringing into this, I have no idea what she's talking about, frankly. And she doesn't provide the site, so who knows, right? But again, it's a distraction. Even if Alan Dershowitz did commit some horrible plagiarizing, that doesn't make it okay for Dr. Gay to. And she, unlike Alan Dershowitz, is indeed the face of Harvard University. She is the president of the entire institution. If there are credible claims of plagiarism against the president, you don't go to a subordinate and start looking under their covers. First, you go to the top.
Esch, political science professor, University of Notre Dame, observed that not only did Dershowitz improperly present someone else's ideas, he may not have even bothered to read the original sources. He copied and pasted in a way that preserved errors in the original citation.
Why does this matter at all?
And now he's going to ask, and I'm just going to stop it. Why does this matter? So she'll say, well, of course. So what? So a professor plagiarizes. So it doesn't matter. So a president of the university plagiarizes. It doesn't matter. Well, obviously, that's crazy. So I just really wanted to go back to that because I appreciated that Jeff took the time to comment, and I really did want to, go back to that story because much of what Brianna Joy Gray has said about inequality, about identity politics, her willingness to criticize the squad, for example, I admire greatly. And she deserves credit for that. But when people that I truly admire go off base as seriously as I believe she has, I'm not going to sit still for it. And I'm actually going to be more upset than I would otherwise be, much more upset. Just like I'm like AOC when she first ran. I mean, I'm so disheartened by her, so kind of disgusted by her act at this point, her phony act at this point. It's hard for me to remember when she first ran, I think it was in 2016, how much, or maybe it was 2018, how much I admired her, how much I wanted her to succeed, how much I thought this is great. This is a blueprint for maybe real change for poor, struggling, and working people. And it's just proven to be just the opposite. Okay, so she was first elected in 2018, not 2016. That being Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All right, I'll leave it at that. John made a good point. Maybe I should try to be a little less cynical, a little less harsh in my judgments. So maybe that's something I'll work on in the new year. You all have a great, great holiday week coming up, and I'll see you after the new year. Thanks again for being part of Halitics. And if you haven't yet, click subscribe. If you haven't yet and you like what I'm doing here, click like. And finally, please let folks know, others who might like what I'm doing here, you think, or maybe hate it, and they'll hate it so much that they won't be able to stop watching. I'll be back in the new year.